In a quiet American town during the early 1900s, known for its cobblestone streets and a courthouse that stood as a symbol of justice, Judge Charles was a man of great reputation. He was admired not only for his fairness but also for his keen intellect and philosophical nature. One day, hearing about the arrival of a renowned scholar, Mr. Jonathan, Judge Charles invited him to conduct a spiritual seminar at the courthouse. The event drew a crowd, eager to hear Jonathan's insights into the mysteries of life and faith. After the seminar, Judge Charles approached Jonathan with a curious smile. "Mr. Jonathan, your wisdom is profound," he said, "but I have 3 questions for you. Ones I've pondered for years. What does God look like? How far can God see? And what does God do?" Jonathan was taken aback. These weren't ordinary questions, and he felt their weight. "Your Honor," he replied cautiously, "these are profound questions. I would need time to reflect before offering you answers." The judge, intrigued, granted Jonathan a month to prepare. "Return with your answers, and I'll be eager to hear them," he said with a nod. Jonathan returned home, but the questions lingered in his mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. Days turned into weeks, and despite his scholarly knowledge, he found no answers that felt satisfactory. His frustration grew, and his once calm demeanor turned into visible unease. One evening, as Jonathan sat by the fireplace, lost in thought, his 12-year-old son, Henry, noticed his distress. "Dad," Henry asked, "why do you seem so worried? You've been quieter than usual." Jonathan hesitated, then shared his predicament. "The judge asked me 3 questions about God, questions I've struggled to answer. I fear disappointing him." Henry listened intently, his young face lighting up with confidence. "Don't worry, Dad," he said with a reassuring grin. "When the time comes, take me with you. I'll answer the judge's questions." Jonathan was skeptical but found comfort in Henry's calm demeanor. On the appointed day, they both traveled to the courthouse. The room was filled with townsfolk, eagerly awaiting the scholar's responses. Judge Charles welcomed them warmly. "Mr. Jonathan," he said, "are you ready to share your answers?" Jonathan stood respectfully and said, "Your Honor, my son, Henry, will answer on my behalf." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs of surprise as the young boy stepped forward. Henry, though small in stature, carried himself with confidence that silenced the crowd. Judge Charles leaned forward, intrigued. "Very well," he said, "let us begin. What does God look like?" Henry smiled and said, "Your Honor, may I request a glass of milk first? It's only proper to offer refreshments to a guest." The judge, slightly embarrassed at the oversight, nodded, and a glass of milk was quickly brought to Henry. Taking the glass, Henry began stirring the milk with a spoon. Peering into it intently, the judge, puzzled, asked, "What are you doing, young man?" "I'm looking for butter in this milk," Henry replied. The courtroom erupted in laughter, but the judge remained curious. "You can't find butter in milk like that," he said. "It needs to be churned first." Henry nodded. "Exactly, Your Honor. Just as butter is hidden in milk, God is present in everyone and everything. But to truly see Him, one must churn the milk, seek Him with sincerity, meditation, and faith." The judge was impressed by the profound simplicity of the answer. He moved to his second question: "How far can God see?" Henry asked for a candle. Once lit and placed before him, he held it up and asked, "Your Honor, how far does the light of this candle reach?" The judge thought for a moment and said, "Its light spreads in all directions." Henry smiled again. "That's your answer. Like this light, God's vision is limitless. He sees everything, everywhere, all at once." The room was silent, the wisdom of Henry's words sinking in. Finally, the judge asked his third and most challenging question: "What does God do?" Henry tilted his head and asked, "Are you asking this as a judge or as a humble learner?" Surprised by the question, the judge paused before replying. "As a humble learner." Henry smiled and gestured toward the bench. "Isn't it curious that the learner is seated on the judge's bench while the teacher stands below?" The courtroom fell silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Realizing the implication, Judge Charles stood and invited Henry to sit on the bench. As the boy climbed into the judge's seat, he explained, "This is what God does. He raises the humble and humbles the mighty. In a single moment, He can transform a king into a servant or a servant into a king." The judge, deeply moved, bowed his head in respect. "You've taught me more than I ever imagined," he said. "Thank you, young man." Applause filled the courthouse as Henry stepped down. Jonathan beamed with pride, and the townsfolk left with a renewed sense of wonder and humility. Lessons for today's society. This story reminds us of timeless truths. God's presence is in everything and everyone. His vision is infinite, and his power to balance the scales of life is undeniable. Whether rich or poor, powerful or meek, we are all equal in his eyes. By living with humility, seeking the divine sincerely, and treating others with kindness, we align ourselves with these eternal principles. If you've ever experienced similar stories in your life, don't hesitate to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. We would love to hear your story.